if you're not tracking your data closely, you're probably making less money on eBay than you think. That's part of what we're going to be talking about today. My name is Justin. I'm the co-founder of Flipwise, an eBay automation platform, joined by Michael, the other co-founder. Hey, Michael.
Howdy, Justin.
We're here for our 5th episode of the Flipwise Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about lots of different things, including a big feature we just released for Flipwise, the income statement, which gives you a incredibly detailed view of the performance of your business from pretty much all facets. It's really interesting to look at. So we'll talk about some behind the scenes about building that and getting that out there to all of our users. We're also going to talk about some other projects we took on. We improved the mileage logging functionality in Flipwise to make it easier to log your miles for tax purposes. We'll also be talking about changes that we made to our gross sales formula. And finally, as we do every week, we'll talk about what's coming next on the roadmap for Flipwise. So that's what it's looking like for this week. How have things been for you, Michael?
Been really good. Excited to talk about this stuff today. I feel like we've kind of hit a big milestone getting this income statement out into the world.
Yeah, it was a lot of hard work. We've been working on it for quite some time. Really excited to get it out to our members, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. I think folks have been excited to be able to see their numbers in the way that the income statement provides. So we'll talk about that here in a second. I think first, maybe we'll dig into some of the changes that we made to the gross sales income, or the gross sales formula on Flipwise. Maybe just a bit of context for folks that are listening to this. So, obviously Flipwise helps you see how your business is performing, your eBay business. And a big part of that is how much you're selling on eBay. That's obviously a very important number. But there's always been very small discrepancies between the numbers that Flipwise shows for your gross sales and the number that eBay shows for your gross sales. Part of the reason that there's a discrepancy between the two is that even on the eBay side, there's a discrepancy between the numbers that eBay has, because they have different reporting mechanisms across their site. There's in fact like 3 main reporting mechanisms. There's what is it, Michael? There's
you got your sales performance report,
right.
You have your financial report, and your tax report.
Yeah, so 3 kind of core reports, and the gross sales number that eBay shows on those 3 reports are different across all 3. And so we spent one exhausting day a couple weeks ago kind of reverse engineering all 3 of those reports on the eBay side to figure out exactly what formula they were using to calculate the gross sales amount so that we could figure out how we align the gross sales amount on Flipwise to eBay. And we really just had to kind of pick one, right? If there's 3 different ones, which one do we align ourselves to? We decided to align ourselves to the tax report, because ultimately that's kind of like the big number, or the big, kind of end point of the year where you're like, okay, I need to have the exact right numbers. I need to make sure that my numbers are matching what eBay says for tax reasons. And so we decided to align ourselves with the gross sales formula that eBay uses for tax purposes. Turns out, we were pretty close. We were already using a formula that was pretty close to that. You want to talk about kind of the formula that we're now using and how that differs from what we were using before?
Yeah. So, and I guess the other important thing to say is that we kind of toyed with the idea of maybe using different formulas in different contexts as well, just like eBay does. And we kind of ultimately just decided, let's just simplify and keep it simple for our users and just have a kind of a single formula that's used across the board. So the formula we use now is, so your gross income is defined as kind of looking at all your orders for the given time frame, what the buyer paid for the product you sold, kind of the order total. And that includes buyer paid shipping and handling, but it doesn't include buyer paid sales tax. It also includes any income you received that was later refunded as part of either a partial refund you gave for whatever reason on a order that was sold, or a partial or full refund you gave on a return. All that's included in your gross income. What's not included is cancellations. So if a buyer buys something from you and then the order is canceled, we don't count that as part of your gross income. It's kind of like as if that order never happened.
Yep.
And Is that it? Am I forgetting anything there?
No, I think that's it. I think that's it. And, I think it's important to say out loud, like we didn't just like randomly decide to choose this formula because it's kind of weird. Like why not include cancellations, but do include refunds. And so like, it seems somewhat haphazard, but we did that just to align ourselves directly with eBay. And so eBay has made the decision that that's how they're going to calculate gross sales for tax reporting. So we just decided, let's make it easy. Let's make it the exact same on the Flipwise side and go from there. So I think that this is going to help quite a bit. And I think we still get questions every once in a while. It's like, hey, why do my gross sales not match on Flipwise for what it says on eBay? And, our response to that definitely, especially now, is that, well, depends on where you're looking. If you're looking at your sales performance screen, it's going to be different for these reasons. If you're looking at your financial report, it's going to be different for these reasons. If you're looking at your tax report, it should match. So you should be good to go there. And we wrote up a nice little help article that kind of lays all that out, describes the differences between all of them and why you'll see discrepancies between all of them. But ultimately, we're just looking to build trust with our own numbers that we are taking their data and calculating it in a way that is logical, that makes sense and that is connected to how eBay does it. And I think we've been pretty successful there. So pretty excited to get that done.
I mean, one interesting thing about this process, it may be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, Justin. I know the kind of major change we made to how the new formula works now compared to how it worked before is the kind of refunded income aspect on returns and on sold orders, where before we just, similar to how we handle it with canceled orders now, before we just kind of pretended like refunded income didn't exist in terms of what your gross income looks like. And I know you struggled with the idea of kind of changing the formula in that way, like putting aside the eBay aspect and wanting to be consistent with eBay. I think in terms of you just being a seller and kind of knowing what you want to see on your dashboard, you didn't want to kind of see refunded income. So maybe it'd be interesting to hear you talk about, like, I don't know, how you came to terms with the idea of kind of doing it that way and that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I was definitely resistant to changing anything, first of all, just because I think when you change something, you have to have a really good reason to do it. Otherwise, people are going to be like, hey, why are you changing stuff? Yeah. This, to me, like, it made sense to change for a couple of reasons. One, just like deliberately aligning ourselves to a logical report on the eBay side makes sense. Initially, I was sort of against including refunds in the gross sales amount because it's really not your income, right? You gave it back, so it's not your income. But, after talking with folks and understanding why refunds are included in that situation, in a lot of situations, including on eBay, it started to make more sense to me as a step, taking my Flipwise hat off and just as a seller, because sales that result in returns are still sales. They still were sales originally, and being able to see broken out like the refund amounts that you were given out of those sales kind of gives you an added level of insight that you didn't have before. Yeah. And I think a great example, and it's funny, like some of the reactions that we're getting from our members who are seeing the income statement for the first time is like, wow, I'm making less than I thought, which is a good thing. It's not a good thing to make less than you thought, but it's a good thing to have like the actual insights that you need, the accurate data, because like it's really difficult to grow your numbers if you don't really know exactly what they are. And so starting on a sort of realistic level that is accurate is exactly the right place to start. And it certainly was the case for me when we turned on this income statement, because I had a really unique scenario that highlights this change into our gross sales formula. Because in October, I sold a very valuable Halloween mask for $500. And then on November 1st, a return was open for that Halloween mask. Somebody rented my Halloween mask for Halloween and then returned it, which is great. But setting that aside, so I got the income, the $500 income in October. So if I look at my October numbers, they look incredible, but then I got the return opened in November. And so from an income statement perspective, my income took a significant hit in November because I didn't get the gross sale amount from the sale because it happened in October, but I took the hit for the return in November. And so it's accurate. It is completely accurate that I, in the month of November, have taken this hit, but it's just interesting to see that. And to me, it's a much more granular understanding of my performance
Yeah.
on an individual time frame. And so to me, that was really eye opening. I was like, okay, this is really powerful what we've built, and it's giving me a level of insight into my own store performance that I just have never had before. And so really, really cool to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that seemed like just what kind of made it like a no-brainer, just like the ability to have that extra insight and just have more detail about what's happening in your store. Like, okay,
Yeah.
that's going to be a good thing. Whereas with canceled orders, like if an order is canceled, that usually happens almost instantly, and
Right.
you're not going to have kind of like your income change from month to month in the same way that you would if you were, you know, in the scenario you just described, where you got some income and then weeks later you lost the income because of the return.
Yeah, cancellations, like it basically never happened in the first place. So.
Yeah.
Well, there's another project that we took on to kind of prepare and get ready for the income statement work, which was around this concept of non-cash transactions. And so in Flipwise, we have a set of functionality called the ledger, and that allows you to record general business expenses. So if you're buying boxes or you're buying subscriptions to Flipwise or whatever, and you need to log those expenses for tax purposes. And so we allow our members to do that through the ledger. You can also log expenses that may not take a hit to your income. And so, for example, when you log mileage, like you drove some miles to a thrift store, you want to record those miles so that you can write them off on your taxes later. But those don't impact your income. You didn't actually pay that money. You just get, you can deduct your total taxable income by that amount. And so that's known as a non-cash transaction. And previously our ledger did not distinguish between the two because there was no reason to distinguish between the two. But when we debuted the income statement, there was a reason to distinguish between a cash transaction and a non-cash transaction. And so as a part of this income statement work, we've now given the ability to go into your ledger and mark a specific transaction as non-cash, which means the income statement will effectively ignore it. So if you log mileage, or you're logging, writing off a portion of your mortgage, for inventory for your storage or something like that, you would mark those as non-cash, and they would not show up on the income statement, but they will show up in the tax report that we're building as well. And so having that distinction between cash and non-cash on ledger entries was kind of a small and, I don't know, somewhat boring project, but important for the actual income statement work.
Yep.
So along with that, the most common non-cash ledger entry type that folks use is logging your mileage. And previously on Flipwise, you just had to, you would log your mileage like you would any other ledger transaction. So if you're buying a box, you would say, I spent $6 on a box. If you were logging your mileage, you'd have to do the calculations yourself. You would say, well, I drove 10 miles and I can write off 67 cents per mile. So I'm going to log $6.70. Not very user-friendly. So as a part of this work as well, we built an entirely new mileage logger into Flipwise. You want to talk a little bit about that, Michael?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I guess one of the reasons we decided to kind of tack on this project is we just thought it would be too confusing. Like the term non-cash expense, like we were worried users might think, do I log things that way if I paid with a credit card, or like just very confusing to talk about it. And so we were kind of struggling with ways to incorporate this into the UI in a way where if somebody's looking to log their mileage, they would kind of know what to do. And we ultimately just decided, let's just build a damn mileage tracker here. So we just built it's kind of a very simple mileage tracker, but hopefully it gets the job done for users. But so now when you go to the ledger and you kind of click new ledger entry, now you make a decision. It prompts you, hey, are you logging just a general business expense or credit, or are you logging mileage? If you click yes, I'm logging mileage, then we open up a new UI that's kind of purpose built for logging mileage. And you can do it in one of two ways. You can just plug in the total amount of miles you drove on this trip, or you can plug in your odometer readings, what my starting odometer was, what my ending odometer was. And then we also kind of ask what the kind of per mile or per kilometer kind of deduction credit is, which is, think it's 67 cents if you're in the US, and then that's a different amount if you're in other countries. And so we pre-populate that for you based on your country. Like, okay, here's from my tax authorities, here's what they give me in terms of a deduction credit per mile or per kilometer I drive. So that's pre-populated for you. And then based on, either your odometer readings or the total miles driven, we compute what your deduction is for the current trip. We kind of do that automatically for you. And so then that ledger entry just shows up in your ledger like any other ledger entry, except it's a non-cash expense. And then in the notes field for the ledger entry, we kind of log all the information about your odometer readings, your total distance driven, and what the per distance unit credit was for that entry.
Yeah. It's another example. I know we've talked about this in the podcast multiple times in the past about sort of the surprises that we run across from being international. We sort of tiptoed our way into supporting sellers outside of the US, in a couple other countries, Canada, Australia, and the UK, along with the United States. And, obviously we put thought into it, but I don't think we fully realized sort of the complexities that would come with being, a multi-nation application. This was a great example where it's a relatively simple and straightforward feature that becomes a little bit more complex because we have to support folks in different countries. Even as simple as like the differences between miles and kilometers, we had to just think about how we can adjust the labels for those types of forms so that they either are generic enough to where talking about miles or kilometers isn't necessary, or that we're able to, be specific when we need to. And I still, even now, we've been developing this application for, a year and a half, maybe. And we've been multinational, at least 6 months, I would say. And I think still, I'm certainly, as I'm thinking through product enhancements and features and writing user stories, I still don't remember, to think about the fact that we are international. We almost always have to go back and be like, oh yeah, by the way, they don't use miles in Australia. So what are we going to do about that? And I don't know, how did we end up handling that from like a code perspective? Like, what are we doing there?
Yeah, I mean, we kept it pretty straightforward. So we do have like a configuration file where we kind of track what the per distance unit credit is you get based on the 4 different countries you might be in if you're a Flipwise user. And so we make sure that from a code perspective, we're dropping the right kind of per unit credit into the user interface based on your location.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, we did kind of talk about like, I don't know, dynamically changing the labels from mile to kilometer based on your location. And we ultimately just realized that we just put like mile/kilometer in a few places, and kind of assume that the user's going to know what they're logging.
Right.
And so we kept it pretty simple. And it's the kind of thing where like, okay, start with a simple UI and see how well it's received. And we may need to make it more sophisticated over time. But it seems like so far what we've built is working out okay for users.
Yeah, I think so. We've gotten only positive feedback, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, all this work we've been talking about so far has been basically prerequisite or precursor work to the income statement. And so we did this week launch the income statement. We started with a beta group who were very helpful giving us feedback on that income statement. And this, again, is just a reoccurring theme with the work that we do. When we take on these bigger projects, we sort of start with a small group of people who volunteer their time, who are interested in helping to shape these different projects that we take on. If you're out there and listening to this and you want to be a part of that as well, we do all that through our Discord server. So that's where we're doing all this beta work. And we collect users who are interested in working on particular features with us, and we're able to sort of feature flag this with them. And so we work on a sort of baseline prototype and do just enough design and development to where it's, makes sense, and a user can look at it and interact with it. And we get that out into an environment where the beta users can use it as well, and they can ask questions, they can log feedback and give bug reports. And it's just so helpful to have these beta groups. It's just, I'm one person, I have one eBay store. And the thing with selling on eBay, there's millions of different ways you can do it. And we've learned that time and time again from our users that the more variety we can get in the way that people use Flipwise and use eBay, the better, our product becomes, because we're considering more than just one viewpoint in my own. So getting that income statement out to a beta group was super helpful. We got so much good feedback from folks on that. And then, just this week, I think after about a week and a half of beta, we decided, hey, this is good. It's pretty rock solid. We're going to go ahead and release it to everyone. And I mean, maybe Michael, just give like a quick overview of like the core functionality of the income statement, what it is and what it shows you. And you want to start with that?
Yeah, for sure. So the income statement just kind of gives you sort of a high level overview of all of the kind of money coming in and going out of your business in kind of any time frame you want. And so if you go to the income statement now, if you're a Flipwise user, the default time frame is month to date. So you'll see, hey, for the current month, how is my business doing? And so at the top of the income statement, it's all your revenue, all your income, kind of broken down by, if you only sell on eBay, you're just going to see your eBay sales. But if you sell on other marketplaces, we'll break down all those sales numbers as well. Your revenue also includes kind of miscellaneous credits, like if you got a shipping credit, or if eBay, we found like an eBay transaction that was a credit to you from like a dispute that you won, things like that. All that is captured as part of your overall business income. And then, the next section is all your expenses. And so, we show you all your marketplace fees, all your shipping costs, everything from your ledger that's a non-cash expense. And so it's like, you've got it pulled up here.
Yeah.
Just let me take a look at this. So, you've got your, everything you spent on new inventory, your marketplace fees kind of rolled up, but also type by type in terms of fee type by fee type. And then, under additional expenses, you've got ledger entries. And then as a kind of a consequence of the work we just talked about on the gross income formula, now order refunds are broken out as an expense, because if that's included in your overall business income, then we need to make sure we're then subtracting it as an expense from what you actually made in terms of your total net income. And we know that 660.01 includes that Halloween mask you got returned.
This is real data here. You're looking at my exact income statement for November. And it's crazy. I mean, look at that. I've earned $3,500 in gross income, total revenue. But my expenses, $2,400. So I've only had a net of $1,099. But, if I go back and if I look at last month, at October, it's really good. I had almost $6,000 in gross, $2,400 in expenses, and I netted $3,500. So really great, month last month. That's because I had that, $500 sale that did not get returned until this month. And that's why this month not looking too hot, but it's completely it's realistic, and sometimes reality hurts for sure.
Yeah. And all that would just be all that whole event, that important economic event for you would have been hidden had we not, adjusted the formula and kind of presented the data in this way. Yeah,
exactly. I think some other interesting things that we did here as well is we've learned over time, when we release these types of features, people are very interested in making sure that what we're presenting them is correct, rightly so. People want to know that they're looking at the accurate, right information and right data. And so as a part of the income statement, we built into it this export feature. And so if I click that, I'm not going to actually run the export, but when you click that and run the export, what it's going to do is email you a zip file effectively. And in that zip file is all of the data that is made up, income statement is using to generate for that particular time frame. So you can go through and see exactly the breakdown of everything on this, all the orders, all of your inventory, every expense, is going to be located in this zip file if you want to double check everything on there. So it's been, it was helpful for us when we were building it, just so we could double check that all the calculations are correct. But just making that available to the user, I think, it adds that sort of helps build that trust. Like, hey, if you want to check and make sure things look right, here's exactly how you can do that.
Exactly. Yeah. And in that, so if you were to click export there, you'd get that email, and then in the email, we actually just describe, here's the 7 CSV files you get. Here's what each one contains, and then we link to a help page from there. And the help page will tell you exactly how to compute every single total that appears on this income statement. So if you really just want to understand, how did you Like, how do I have $2,400 in expenses? Like, how did you get that number? Like, it's not a mystery. We can see
Yeah.
exactly how we're doing it, and you can look at all the underlying data and figure out why these numbers are the way they are.
Yep. Yeah, and I think another thing we're talking about is sort of, kind of the differences between the income statement and the sales insight screen. And so before we released the income statement, we only had, this was really our main reporting mechanism, is the sales insight screen. Very helpful, but it was exclusive to sales data and inventory data. So it was ignoring basically anything that wasn't related to a sale. So any of your ledger entries or miscellaneous debits and credits that weren't associated with specific orders was not being reflected on this screen. So this screen is super important to understand purely how you're doing from a sales and inventory perspective. I look at this screen probably the most of any screen in Flipwise just to understand what's going on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And it breaks down all of the numbers. But again, it's exclusive to sales. And so the income statement, again, is supposed to pull everything. The idea is that it's all facets of your business. It's, as long as you're putting it into Flipwise, Flipwise is going to spit it back out to you as an income statement here and give you basically, down to every line item exactly how your business is performing. So they're very similar, but they serve sort of different purposes. And this is again a precursor to a set of work that we are now turning our attention towards and are going to be working on through the remainder of the year. And we have a little call out right here on the side of the income statement, which is the tax report. And so that is sort of going to be the not final, but the next project, major project that we're working on in Flipwise is to make sure that our members have everything that they need to be able to produce a tax report with as little friction as possible. And so the idea here is that, across Flipwise, we're encouraging our users to input their acquisition data, to get their costs in there, to make sure that their shipping costs are recorded, to record all their ledger entries, and the reward for our users who take that seriously and who make sure that everything is being tracked is really comes down to this tax report that we're going to be doing, because it will literally be like, it'll basically do everything for you. Like, you'll have everything that you need with a click of a button, assuming you've entered all your information over the course of the year. This tax report will produce everything that you need. Very similar to the income statement, not necessarily in look and feel, I guess, or function. Maybe it's not that similar to the income statement, but in theory, sort of a similar type piece of functionality, but that's catered specifically to a tax report. Because an income statement is meant to be like, how much money are you making at any given time frame, and slice and dice, whatever time frame you want. But a tax report is very different, right? A tax report's using the same data, but it's presenting it for a different purpose. Maybe, Michael, you could talk a little bit about the differences between what we have as an income statement today and what the tax report will have on it in the near future.
Yeah, good question. So in terms of some of the similarities, like the export feature that we talked about for the income statement, all that will be there for the tax report as well. So all the kind of raw data that was considered for creating your tax report will be exportable, and again, we'll tell you how to understand how all those totals are computed by Flipwise. So what are some of the differences? One of the major differences is that we're going to be including those non-cash expenses that we just talked through. So if you log mileage or a home office deduction or whatever, that's going to be reflected on your tax report. Another big difference is the way that we talk to you about, or the way that we report on your cost of goods sold and your kind of inventory spend. Like, there's more detail that's required on a tax return, whether you're self-filing or whether you're using a CPA, than just like, hey, what did I spend over the course of the tax year? And so we're going to show you what the kind of key numbers you need to have to do your taxes are, like, what was the value of your inventory on hand at the start of the tax year? What was the value of your inventory on hand at the end of the tax year? What was your cost of goods sold throughout the year? And then finally, that number that's on the income statement, which is what did you actually spend on new inventory over the course of the year? So we probably don't want to get into all the weeds of like accrual inventory method, the different inventory methods that a seller might want to use. But basically, like with those 4 data points, you should be well prepared to kind of like file your taxes, however you or your CPA decides that you ought to file them. And there's a few other a few other things that honestly, like you and I, Justin, are still kind of just working out right now in terms of like just presentation. Like refunds is kind of is something that obviously needs to be there. So we're definitely going to tell you what your refund amount was, or the amount of money over the course of the year that you refunded to buyers. That's going to be surfaced, but it may be presented slightly differently. Like we're trying to kind of just make this as easy as possible. We assume if you have a CPA, your CPA is going to, like, we know that you're going to be in good hands in terms of the data we're giving you if you're working with a CPA, but we also want to make this as easy as possible if you're self-filing. Yeah. And so we're kind of having conversations right now about like, how do we just present this data so that like, maybe the order that we present this data in is the exact order that you'd probably be asked for the data if you're using something like TurboTax to self-file. So those would be some of the other differences, just subtle differences in presentation, so that it's just as easy as possible for you to kind of get your taxes done.
Yeah. And Michael and I actually spent a day this week. We bought TurboTax. We spent $140 of our hard-earned money and bought TurboTax and pretended that we were trying to file our taxes and went through. That was actually super helpful to do that. And I know that all tax software is different from one another, but they're basically, they're all trying to achieve the same outcome. And so by going through that process, it was a helpful reminder about like what our own members will be doing in the future. And so, we've really designed the tax report to present the data that's already there. And again, it's basically the same data that's on the income statement, but present it in a way that is specific for tax preparation and reporting. Yeah. And so, the big one, which Michael talked about just a second ago, is that inventory and cost of goods sold. And, we looked at how TurboTax asks you about that stuff, and we're even, using the same language that they're using in certain areas just to reinforce that these are the numbers you should be using, for that particular part of TurboTax. And we're, kind of, I think that, we're not finalized the design yet, but I think when you land on a tax report, it's kind of going to be 3 big sections of data, whereas the income statement's almost like a ledger, it's like a record of all these that all total up, and the tax report will be a little bit different in that there'll be kind of 3 sections, and one of them will be your business income, and that's pretty obvious. It's your total revenue. It's where, revenue coming from sales from your marketplaces and revenue coming from other places that you may have logged in the ledger. The second section, will be around the inventory and cost of goods sold, which, as Michael said earlier, will have all the data that you need regardless of the inventory accounting method that you use. Doesn't matter which one you use, all the data will be there that you can pick and choose how you want to use it. And then a third section really around business expenses. What are all the expenses that you incurred throughout the year? And again, just sort of formatted in a way that is likely what a tax preparation software is going to need, or that a CPA is going to expect. And I think we mentioned this last time, but we're working with a CPA who is specifically a CPA for resellers. He has helped us design this. We've bounced a bunch of questions off of him. We basically said, like, look, what do you wish that all your clients gave you? That's what we want to build. And that's what this is. There'll be that same export button. When you click that export button, you're going to get an email that is a zip file that has literally everything you need to file your taxes. If you have a CPA, you just send that to them, and as long as you've entered in your data throughout the year on Flipwise, it'll produce everything you need. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. And it's a good point. We're working with a CPA. Like, we did download TurboTax the other day and go through that process, but it's not like that's the only thing we've done. We've been working with a CPA for like six months or so now, off and on, just to make sure we're on the right track here. But this TurboTax exercise was more like, we feel like we're covered on what a CPA needs, and now it's just more like from a user experience, usability perspective, like, man, how do we just, kind of put ourselves in the mind of a self-filer and just make sure that we're considering what the questions they're going to be asked and the things they might be confused about. Like, we can't offer tax advice or tell you how to file your taxes, right, but we kind of want to walk up to that line and just orient you as much as possible and make things as easy as we can, in our role as not a CPA, as your kind of like your bookkeeping, accounting kind of software.
Yeah, and anticipate the questions you're likely to have, and provide guidance on how to answer those. And again, it's a fine line to walk, because you're right, we can't give tax advice. We don't want to give tax advice. That's not our area of expertise. But what we can do is give you all of your data and present it in a way that is most likely to be helpful for tax preparation. And I think that we'll definitely be able to achieve that. I'm super excited. I'm super excited to do my own taxes with this. It's just going to make my own life all that much easier. So. Well, with tax reporting, we're going to have that done and ready to go well before our members need to start thinking about filing their taxes. So that's kind of the focus of our efforts through the end of the year, is just to make sure that's all buttoned up and ready to go, so that early January, when people are starting to be like, oh, okay, now I need to start thinking about taxes, that you have all that there at your fingertips and can start using it. Beyond that, we still have kind of two big projects that we know we are very excited to do. We know a lot of our members are very excited to see them. One of those is bulk editing, the ability to just mass select many records in Flipwise and update them with the same storage location or the same purchase location or price or things like that. I think, to me, that feels like the next most important. I think that having bulk editing can also aid in the sort of tax preparation process as well. So that's, if somebody was holding a gun to my head saying, what are we working on next? I feel like that's probably what I would say, just because it will help with that tax preparation. But the other big project, which a lot of people are waiting for and excited about, is unlisted inventory. Being able to get your death pile itemized in Flipwise, so that you're tracking. You don't have to wait until something is listed on eBay in order to get it into Flipwise. So another big project that we're super excited to work on, and is going to be coming very soon. And it's just we're trying to get this tax stuff done and ready before the end of the year.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be super fun to change focus to that stuff. It's been on our radar for a while. We've had to do all this kind of long sequence of work leading up to the tax report. But man, we're about to round the corner and finally get to these other two things that I know a lot of our users are very, very eager to have. Yeah,
for sure. Well, I think that's about what we have for today. I'd like to say that we're going to maybe get another podcast in here before the end of the year. Perhaps when we finish up this tax reporting work, we can get on here and talk a little bit about the journey of getting that work done, and maybe some more insight into future roadmap of early 2025. So hopefully we will see y'all back here on the Flipwise podcast before the end of the year, hopefully. But appreciate y'all watching, and we'll see you soon.